The courtroom was silent until Judge Amy Coney Barrett leaned forward, her voice sharp and commanding. "Representative Crockett, that is enough." The words cut through the chamber like a blade. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned closer, and every breath in the room seemed to freeze. Jasmine Crockett, however, did not flinch. Instead, she looked directly at Barrett and replied with calm defiance, "No, Judge, it is not enough. It will never be enough until the truth is spoken here in this court for everyone to hear." The tension ignited instantly. What was meant to be a routine session turned into a high-stakes confrontation between a Supreme Court justice and one of the most outspoken voices in Congress. What happened in the next few minutes would not only stun those in the chamber, but would ripple across the nation, sparking debates about power, silencing, and who truly controls the narrative in America. "They told me to keep it tidy," Jasmine Crockett began, voice steady. "But tidy is how the truth gets buried." She named the stakes in clear-clipped sentences. Selective enforcement, double standards, a system that punishes the loud and protects the powerful. She pointed to filings, dates, and votes. On May the 5th, you praised restraint. On June the 10th, you called it overreach. Same statute, same facts, different people. That is not jurisprudence. That is choreography. Judge Amy Coney Barrett answered without hesitation. "Representative Crockett, this forum requires precision, not performance. Your rhetoric does not transform conjecture into law." Her tone was contained, almost clinical. "We are here to address a single question, not your entire indictment of the American conscience." "A single question that keeps changing whenever it gets uncomfortable," Crockett replied. "When the rules shield one side, the rules are recited like scripture. When the rules expose that shield, suddenly we are warned to lower our voices." She gestured to the council's tables. "Counselor Reeves, you argued last winter that precedent is a guardrail. Today you argue precedent is a prison. Which story are we telling the people who sent us here?" Reeves spoke tightly. "We're telling them the story of fidelity to the Constitution." "Fidelity without consistency is theater," Crockett shot back. "You cite fairness, then you silence inquiry. You call for decorum, then you dock the mic the moment facts turn inconvenient." Barrett interjected. "No one is silencing you. I am instructing you to confine yourself to the matter before the court." "Confinement has never served the truth," Crockett said, leaning into each word. "Ask anyone who has ever watched a question shrink until only the comfortable piece remains. The matter before the court is not a pinhole. It is a pattern. That is why I am here, Judge, not to perform, but to refuse the performance that keeps repeating." A second attorney, Hart, cleared his throat. "Representative, your accusations presume bad faith." "My accusations presume memory," Crockett answered. "I remember the hearings where urgency was demanded at sunrise and delay was demanded at sunset. I remember the promises of neutrality that somehow always landed on one side of the scale. If that is not a pattern, then the words have lost their meaning." Barrett's voice lowered. "Meaning is exactly what we will recover by narrowing our scope. You will proceed to the relevant record." "Gladly," Crockett said. "Record page 43, the standard of review you praised as settled. Record page 44, the same standard you rebranded as flexible when the beneficiary changed. And on page 45, your own concurring note declaring that public trust is earned by clarity, not by cleverness. I am reading you back to yourself, Your Honor." A murmur rolled through the room. Barrett paused only a heartbeat. "Then read the next line, Representative, the one that warns against conflating legal tests with political narratives." "I read it," Crockett replied, "and I reject the false choice. We cannot pretend the law floats above life. Law lives inside life. It breathes with the people who must obey it, and it breaks when it forgets them." Reeves pressed again. "This drift into philosophy is precisely the problem." "It is the point," Crockett said, "because philosophy becomes policy, and policy becomes punishment, and punishment becomes the story families tell their children about why the doors did not open for them." Barrett drew the boundary once more. "This court will hear facts." "Here are the facts," Crockett said, crisp and unhurried. "The same conduct described in parallel terms received divergent treatment. The same deadlines, when missed by the powerful, were framed as harmless error, and when missed by the powerless were framed as unforgivable defiance. The same citations were read as shields for one, swords for another, fact, fact, fact. She tapped the folder. And the country is watching which facts we permit to stand. Barrett met the gaze she could not sidestep. Then we will test those facts, but you will not turn this bench into a barricade. I would never, Crockett said softly. I intend to turn it into a mirror. The room held its breath again. Hart tried to cut in with a procedural motion. Crockett overrode it with a single sentence that hung like a bell. If fairness is fragile, it was never fairness at all. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The narrative had been set. A justice guarding the frame of order, a congresswoman tearing at the frame to reveal the picture behind it, counselors clinging to doctrine, and a country crowding the doorway, demanding to see. The third exchange began like a duel. Judge Barrett raised her hand, signaling for restraint. Representative Crockett, this tribunal will not permit the chamber to become a stage for accusations unmoored from the record. Her voice was firm, but behind the calm there was urgency. She wanted control, and she wanted it now. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her words measured yet sharp enough to cut the stillness. Unmoored, Judge, the record itself cries out. Page 62, testimony sworn under oath, describing direct pressure applied by political operatives. Page 63. Documentation of exceptions carved for allies while opponents were held to the strictest letter of the law. These are not echoes of rumor. These are the words of your own files. Barrett's eyes narrowed. Those passages are subject to interpretation. Interpretation? Crockett countered. When deadlines are ignored by senators and forgiven with a smile but enforced like shackles on activists, is that interpretation? When identical petitions are dismissed as frivolous in one hand and elevated as precedent in another, is that interpretation? Or is it selective memory designed to protect the crown while crushing the critic? Reeves, the counsel, could no longer remain seated. Objection, Your Honor. The representative is impugning motives without substantiation. Crockett snapped back. Substantiation! I just cited the exhibits you filed. I just quoted the notes you authored. If the truth impugns motives, perhaps the motives should be examined, not ignored. The chamber stirred, whispers rising like a tide. Cameras zoomed closer. Crockett pressed harder, her voice building momentum. This is not a courtroom in isolation. This is America watching whether even the highest bench bends under political weight. Tell me, Judge, who benefits when silence is enforced? Who wins when the microphone goes dark? Barrett straightened in her chair. Representative, you are out of line. No, Judge, Crockett declared. I'm standing exactly on the line the people drew when they sent me here. They asked me not to bow. They asked me not to bite my tongue when the script demands silence. They asked me to speak truth, even when the walls tremble. Hart tried to calm the storm. Representative Crockett, you risk contempt of court. She met him without a blink. And you risk contempt of history. Which verdict do you fear more? Gasps broke across the benches. Reporters scribbled, fingers flying over keyboards, live feeds flashing headlines. Barrett exhaled, gathering her authority. This chamber will not tolerate disruption. This chamber, Crockett said, voice now resonant, was built to tolerate scrutiny. If it cannot endure words, how will it endure justice? The weight of her challenge landed heavily. The audience felt it, the justices felt it, even the attorneys who opposed her felt it. Barrett pressed her gavel once, sharp and echoing, yet for all its force, the sound could not erase the sting of Crockett's last sentence. The conflict was no longer a debate about documents. It had become a collision between power guarded by silence and power unleashed through speech. The balance of the chamber teetered, waiting for the next strike. The gavel struck again, but the sound only sharpened the air. Judge Barrett leaned in, her tone steel. Representative Crockett, your refusal to comply with the rules of this chamber will have consequences. If necessary, I will order your microphone cut. The threat was unmistakable, a line rarely crossed in such a high-stakes proceeding. For a moment, the room seemed to pause, caught between command and rebellion. Crockett did not waver. She lifted her head, eyes locked on the bench, and said the words that would ricochet across America within minutes. If justice must be muted to survive, then it is not justice. It is theater, and I will not be an actor in your play. Gasps erupted. Some in the gallery clapped before being hushed. Reporters shot to their feet, pens racing. Barrett's jaw tightened. You are out of order. No, Judge, Crockett answered, her voice swelling. This court is out of order when it protects comfort over truth. You may silence this microphone, but you cannot silence the millions who know the difference between law and loyalty. Barrett gave a curt nod to the clerk. Hands moved toward the control panel. The room braced for the cut, but Crockett leaned forward, voice carrying even without amplification, rising above the threat. Every precedent you bend to shield the powerful is a precedent the powerless will remember. You cannot erase the memory of a people tired of being told to wait, to sit down, to shut up. The microphone went dead, yet her words had already pierced the chamber. Phones recorded, lips moved, echoes rolled. The silence of the mic only amplified the sound of her defiance, spreading like wildfire across feeds and networks. Within seconds, hashtags formed, posts multiplied, and a storm ignited online. The very act meant to erase her voice became the act that magnified it. Barrett struck the gavel again, but the chamber was no longer hers to command. Crockett, without pause, shouted one final line that shook even the marble columns. If you are afraid of my voice, then you are already afraid of the truth. The court erupted, shouts, murmurs, stunned silence overlapping like waves. Even the attorneys sat frozen, unsure whether to object or to simply absorb the shock. Barrett, for all her authority, could not contain the fact that history had just shifted in a single confrontation. The climax had arrived, and the nation was already replaying it frame by frame, searching for meaning in every syllable. The courtroom adjourned, but the echo of Jasmine Crockett's defiance refused to fade. Judge Barrett had tried to enforce silence, yet the attempt only magnified Crockett's voice. Within hours, her words spread beyond the marble walls, replayed on every screen, debated in every forum. Supporters called her fearless, critics called her reckless, but no one ignored her. The phrase, "If justice must be muted, it is not justice," became a rallying cry, painted on signs, shared in headlines, and repeated across the nation. Barrett's authority remained intact on paper, but in the public mind, the clash exposed a deeper struggle between control and truth, silence and speech. Crockett's stance reminded America that institutions may carry gavels, but voices carry power. And in that moment, one voice reshaped the narrative, proving that truth, once spoken, cannot be buried.